Good morning, students. We are going to talk about types of games used in teaching foreign language. Types of games. What is a game? Games are fun activities that promote interaction, thinking, learning, and problem-solving strategies. Often games have an aspect that permits the players to produce information in a short time period. Some games require the players to engage in a physical activity or complete a mental challenge. What are some guidelines for using games effectively in the classroom? The game must have a clear learning objective and purpose. The teacher should assign students to teams. Be sure to explain all necessary procedures and the rules clearly and slowly. Be consistent. Be prepared. Maintain a non-threatening environment. It may be useful to have students create games. Types of games: bluff, incantator, truth, lie. Bluff. Level skill reinforced, materials noun, procedure, beginner to understand, pronunciation development, vocabulary identification. Divide the group into two teams. The teacher will ask one team to define a vocabulary word. Any student who knows the definition will stand up. A student on the opposing team will select one of the students standing to translate. If the student's definition is correct, then 1 point for each person standing is awarded. If the student's definition is incorrect, then 1 point per person standing is deducted. Incantator. Skill reinforced, beginner to advanced, making introductions, team building. Note cards or pieces of paper per person. Each person in the group should write their first name or name they go by on one card and their last name on the other. The teacher should collect all the cards and distribute them so that no one gets either of their own card. The students should then go around and introduce themselves to each other until they get both of their cards back. Sentence writing, community development, listening comprehension. Paper and a pencil. Distribute a paper and pencil to each student. Each student should write their name on the paper. Next, he should write the 3 sentences about himself. 2 of them should be true and 1 should be a lie. Collect the sentences and read the sentences to the class and have them guess which one is a lie. Why should games be used in classrooms? Games allow for creativity, independence, and higher order thinking. Usually questions posed by the classroom teacher fact-based and have only one answer, not allowing for creativity. Personal expression or testing hypothesis. The answer is either right or wrong, but games can allow for multiple answers. They improve participation, self-esteem, and the vocabulary usage and allow the learners to say that there are many ways to solve the same problem. Additionally, it's more like real life. For instance, most conversations start with open-ended questions. How are you? What did you do yesterday? How can I help you? And what would you like for dinner? As foreign language learners, it's important that they're provided with scenarios that are as realistic as possible. Games, if produced well, can do the same thing. Easy ways to do that involve the students finishing sentences, listing words that begin with a certain letter, answering open-ended questions on a board game, or telling a story. So let's continue. Teaching devoid of any interest and taken only by force of compulsion kills in the student hand to master knowledge. To encourage a child to learn much more worthy task what to do with it. Questions of enhancing students' cognitive activity are among the most pressing problems of modern pedagogical science and practice. The implementation of the principle of activity in learning is of great importance, since learning and development are activity related, and the result of learning, development, and education of students depends on the quality of learning as an activity. The key problem in solving the problem of improving the efficiency and the quality of the educational process is the intensification of students' cognitive activity. Knowledge obtained in finished form, as a rule, causes difficulties for students in the application to the explanation of observed phenomena and the solution of specific problems. One of the significant shortcomings of students' knowledge remains formalism, which is manifested in the separation of learned theoretical knowledge from the ability to apply them in practice. In the conditions of communization of education, the existing theory and the technology of mass education should be aimed at forming a strong personality capable of living and working in a continuously changing world, capable of boldly developing its own strategies of behavior, making moral choices and taking responsibility for it. Personality self-developing and self-fulfilling. Activization of students' cognitive activity. In the modern educational process, the main thing is not just the mastery of subject knowledge, skills and abilities, the volume of which is constantly growing, but the very personality of the student as an active figure, having the appropriate structure of the need motivational sphere. As the nature of the needs motivates interests underlying the activity, that determines the direction and the content of the activity of each person. At the same time, involvement in cognitive activity initiative in it, self-satisfaction and the results ensure the experience of meaningfulness, significance of what is happening as the basis for future self-improvement and self-realization of a person. Learning is an intense, complex activity that requires a great effort of mind, will, imagination, memory, reflecting all the essential properties of the pedagogical process. Bilateralism focuses on the all-round development of the individual, the unity of the substantive and the procedural sides, training and at the same time a specific qualitative differentiates. Cognitive activity is the unity of sensory perception, theoretical thinking, and the practical activity. It's carried out at every life step, in all types of activities and the social relationships of students, productive and the socially useful work, value orientation, artistic and aesthetic activities, communication, as well as by performing various practical activities in the educational process, experimentation, designing, solving research problems, etc. The attitude of students to the learning process is usually characterized by activity. Activity, learning, mastering content, determines the degree, intensity, strength of the contact of the learner with the subject of his activity. One more important aspect of the motivation of students' learning is directly linked with activity. This is independence, which is associated with the definition of the object, the means of activity, and its implementation by the students themselves without the help of adults and the teachers. Cognitive activity and independence are inseparable from each other. More active learners are, and as a rule, more independent. The student's own lack of activity makes him dependent on others and deprives independence. Student activity management is traditionally called activation. Activation can be defined as a constantly ongoing process of encouraging students to energetic, purposeful learning, overcoming passive and typical activities, recession and the mental stagnation. The main goal of activation is the formation of students' activity, improving the quality of the educational process. In pedagogical practice, various ways of activating cognitive activity are used. The main among them variety of forms, methods, and the means of training, the choice of thus combinations of them that in rising situations stimulate the activity and independence of students. The greatest activity and effect in the classroom is given by situations in which the students themselves must to defend their opinion, take part in discussions, to put questions to his comrades and the teachers, review the answers of comrades, evaluate the answers in the written work of friends, to engage in training and slackers, explain incomprehensible material to weaker students, definitely choose a feasible task, to find several options for a possible solution of the cognitive task problem, create situations of self-examinations, analysis of personal cognitive and practical actions. When choosing one or another teaching methods, one must first of all strive for a productive result. At the same time, the student is required not only to understand, remember, and reproduce the knowledge gained, but also to be able to operate with them, apply them in practical activities, develop them, because the degree of learning productivity depends largely on the level of activity of the student's learning and the cognitive activity. It's very important that the educational and the cognitive activity of students be creative, exploratory in nature, and if possible include elements of analysis and synthesis. The process of studying a phenomenon or problem must be research-based in all its attributes. It's very important that educational cognitive activity of students be creative, exploratory in nature, and if possible include elements of analysis and synthesis. The process of studying a phenomenon or a problem must be research-based in all its attributes. This is another important principle of activating educational and the cognitive activity. The principle of studying the problem and phenomena under study. Also requires the use of such forms in the teaching methods that, if possible, will take into account the individual characteristics of each student, implement the principle of individualization of the educational process. No less important in the educational process is the mechanism of self-control and self-regulation, implementation of the principle of self-learning. This principle allows us to individualize the learning and cognitive activity of each student on the basis of their personal desire to replenish and improve their own knowledge and skills, studying independently, additional literature, receiving advice. The activity of both independent and the collective activity of students is possible only if there are incentives. Therefore, among the principles of activation, a special place is given to the motivation of educational and the cognitive activity. The main thing at the beginning of an activity should not be forcedness, but the student's desire to solve problem, to know something, to prove the challenge. The principles of activating the educational and the cognitive activity of students, as well as the choice of teaching methods, should be determined taking into account the features of the educational process. In addition to the principles and the methods, there are also factors that encourage students to be active. They can also be called as motives or incentives for the teachers to enhance the activities of students. Among the main factors that motivate students to be active are the creative nature of learning and the cognitive activity in itself, a powerful incentive to knowledge. The research character of educational and the cognitive activity allows students to awaken a creative interest, and this in turn encourages them to actively search for new and in-depth knowledge. Competition is also one of the main motivators of